We are extraordinarily fortunate in our community to have an established organization through our public health department that works tirelessly to bring education and a whole bunch of other stuff around trauma-informed care. My esteemed colleague, Cindy Meyer, is going to come up and tell you about the Asis Action Alliance, and let's give her a hand. She's my favorite.
Thank you. That's wired.
No, you have to both. This is for video, this is for the room.
Oh, okay.
Oh, and here. There you go.
Oops, great, thank you. Thanks, Delana. So how many of you today feel, let's see if we've got some slides there, feel energized by learning some new information today? And how many want to get out there and share that information with someone else? Are you thinking of someone that you might go home to tonight or at your work that you want to talk to this about and maybe even make some changes? Well, I think that when we go forth with new information and we do that on our own, we become one little voice out there trying to make change. If we have others that join us and also add their voices to the conversation, we create a little bit more change, but still our rippled effect may go out and hit barriers and eventually die out. But if we join together as a multitude of voices and a multitude of actions, we can make lasting, sustainable change. And that's the power of collaborative efforts and collaborative partnerships. So here in Clark County, we decided a couple years ago, let's get folks together to talk about adverse childhood experiences, childhood trauma, toxic stress, and how we build resilience in our communities and in ourselves. We called that group the Asis Action Alliance, and we come together on a monthly basis and more often in smaller task forces and committees to see how we can work across sectors in our community to help facilitate that change. A change in our understanding and awareness and our knowledge about Asis, and changes in how we think about our approaches to our problems, how we work with one another, how we set up our businesses, how we teach our children, and so forth. We try to include all sectors of the community, from law enforcement, social services, faith communities, schools, et cetera, because it takes all of us. Asis don't happen to just one group in our community, and just one group of workplaces and care providers is not alone in how they interact with folks who've had trauma. So we need to have this as a widespread effort, and we try to incorporate that. The Asis Action Alliance, how many of you have heard of us before? Great, okay, and so most haven't, and that's great, because that's who I want to reach. The Asis Alliance is first and foremost a learning collaborative. So we get together at our general meetings on a monthly basis and we bring in speakers. One of our goals is to help educate our existing agencies and organizations in this community to know each other. You know, what do you offer? How do we refer patients to you? What do you do? What are you seeing? How are you operating? But we also do things like bring in Jim Sporletter, who was the principal of the high school in Walla Walla that was the focus of Paper Tigers. How many have seen the film Paper Tigers? Oh, we need to do another screening then, obviously. So a first trauma-informed high school in Washington State. We talk about mentoring, we teach the brain architecture game, we give you tools and resources and that sort of thing. We're guided by the socio-ecological model. So what this model says is that change begins with our own internal understanding, and then it grows by our interpersonal sharing of our information and thinking together of how we can create change. And then it needs to go on to organizational change. How are we going to change the way that we do things in our organizations? How do we change the culture of our community? And finally, how do we reflect that in policy? We are trying to work both up and down that socio-ecological model so that we create a total paradigm shift in our community about how we think about each other, how we work together. So by the numbers, since we really got started in 2016, our membership has grown from about 75 people to more than 390 people. We've done training for more than 8,000 folks, and if we added in all the training Delana does, and probably Lydia's done up here, it's way more than that, and we've touched 90 organizations. We initiated a website that I'll talk about more in a minute, and we have a Facebook page that has 381 followers, and we worked first with kind of the low-hanging fruit, where teachers really want to see behavior change in their children. They were really receptive. We have really worked hard with our schools and are making a lot of impact there with schools and early childhood educators. Law enforcement and corrections were already on a great track, and we've tried to help support that, and we're great partners there. Some faith communities and social service agencies. So we have a variety of teams. We have our general alliance meetings, but we also have a small team that works on assessment and evaluation. We have the trauma-informed schools team that brought representatives from every district together, so we're not all recreating the wheel, so we can share ideas. We have an outreach and communications team that is planning events. This summer, we're finally forming, it's kind of cart behind the horse, but we're forming a steering committee and a policy team. And then the last one we're adding is a patient care team. And that's what I wanted to talk to you all about today. So in patient care, that's probably one of our biggest hurdles for a lot of reasons we'll talk about, but it's really critical that we start thinking about how do we bring these concepts into how we deal with and help our patients and their families, and even the people that work in our care provider workplaces. So the tenet of that is that trauma can affect anyone. It doesn't only affect those people over there. It affects all of us in this room. And if we did a little survey, we'd probably find out that at least a third of us have had a bit of trauma in our backgrounds. So we're bringing that to work every day. And then our patients that are coming in the door, or our clients, are also bringing their trauma in. That can not only be upsetting for them if we re-trigger them, but it can also be re-triggering for us as caregivers because of our compassion fatigue and so forth. So we need to really think that through in how we provide services. Being trauma-informed can also help us in the way we care for people. So as an example, Anda and Folletti did a little study. Those were the original investigators who did the ACE study. They did a simple thing of asking this question: how did that traumatic experience affect you later in life? And then they did this incredible thing. They just shut up and listened. And just because they listened, those people had 35 fewer primary care visits, 11% fewer emergency room visits, and 3% fewer hospitalizations, just because they knew someone cared and asked the question. So imagine if we incorporated this knowledge into our practices. Another thing that we need to keep in mind in being a trauma-informed organization is that as our employees' Asis increase, incidences of problems also increase. So and this was another Folletti and Anda study that they did as a follow-on, and they resurveyed their original participants, 9,600 of them out of the 17,000, asked them the original ACE studies, and then asked them these questions about relationships, emotional issues, somatic problems, and substance use issues. And what they found is that with zero ACEs, 37% of these folks had relationship problems. When they had 4 or more, they had 57% had relationship problems. And skipping down, because you can read this, 22% had substance abuse issues if they had had zero ACEs. 52% reported continuing substance abuse problems with 4 or more. And this is employees. These are employed people. So think about your own workforce. Yes, Elena? Oh, 5 minutes, thank you. So we talked a little bit. Lydia referred to the key principles of a trauma-informed organization: safety for everyone, trust and transparency, having voice and choice, peer support and collaboration, empowerment, time for self-care and reflection, and sensitivity to cultural, historical, and gender issues. So those are the key tenets of being a trauma-informed organization. But what does that really mean? That's the hard work of putting this into practice. So our goal with this patient care team, or whatever that group decides to call themselves, is to kind of dig deep into that. The interesting thing about this work is it's really new. We don't really have a clear defined pathway or a toolkit for doing this. We're studying it across the country, across the state. So having a team where we can come together and talk about this and come up with solutions that fit for us, that may look a little different from one organization to the next, is going to be a great learning experience and a way we can benefit one another. But these are some of the kinds of questions we'll be talking about. So I want to invite you to join us. I have a sign-up sheet I'm going to put at the table over there where you signed in. If you're interested, in being part of the trauma-informed organization, let me go back here. Trauma-informed organization pathway team, just sign up on there. I already have one sign-up, so I'm excited about that. And we will get back to you for a meeting in July, and I have some great ideas for some support for that group. Another thing is we do have our next Alliance meeting. The general meeting is on May 29th, that's Tuesday. Department of Community Services will be there to present their community needs assessment about mental health, poverty, and so forth in our community. 3:30 to 5:30 at the Center for Community Health. We have a Facebook page and a website that you can follow, and then we're having a book discussion, which I think is really relevant to this group today. We read this book as a group at Public Health recently, and it was extremely impactful to many of us. It's the story of Susan Burton, who grew up with racism and poverty in South Central LA. It's the story of how she became addicted to drugs as a method of self-soothing. And then she served 6 prison sentences, became separated from her family, and lived with that stigma that we talked about earlier today, not only of drug addiction, but of having been imprisoned and incarcerated. So she has amazing points to make in her book, and if you don't have time or the ability to get the book, I have Cindy's Cliff Notes attached to this, and you can read the key excerpts, because I don't want anyone left out of this discussion. So we're going to get together on June 18th from 6 to 8 p.m. at the Cascade Park Community Library. And if you forget to get one of these, or I didn't bring enough for everybody, you can go to the Asis Action Alliance website, and it has all that information, and the downloaded Cliff Notes are downloadable there. So there's our website name. We have a calendar of events on there, resources for you, stories of resilience. We have a Facebook page where you can follow us, and I'll tell you, there's some folks in our community that post there constantly, so you'll get lots of info. And last thing I want to encourage you to do is recognize that this is new, and the wave is building speed and momentum across our country and in our community. It's a very exciting time about this knowledge we have about being trauma-informed and how this childhood trauma is impacting us. So please join with us. Get on the wave, ride it to the crest, and see the change that can happen. Let's do this together. It's a really amazing time to be alive. So I want to thank you and hope you enjoy the rest of the presentations this morning.